Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight, creating a mesmerizing ballet of tiny, glimmering specks. The room was a time capsule, untouched by the modern world. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of decay and the musty aroma of aged wood and forgotten memories. Each breath felt like inhaling history itself. I browsed the cramped aisles, intrigued by forgotten relics. The narrow paths were lined with shelves overflowing with trinkets and treasures, each one a silent witness to a bygone era. Each object held a story, a whisper of the past. From tarnished silverware to faded photographs, every item seemed to murmur secrets of lives once lived. Then I saw her, tucked away in a dark corner, Evelyn. She stood out among the clutter, an enigmatic presence that demanded attention. A porcelain doll, her beauty marred by time. Her once pristine features were now cracked, and her dress, once vibrant, had faded to a ghostly hue. Cracked porcelain, faded velvet dress, yet her eyes held mine. They were hauntingly lifelike, as if they had seen and remembered everything. A strange pull drew me to her, a feeling of both unease and irresistible fascination. It was as if she was calling out to me, her silent voice echoing in my mind. I had to have her. There was no question, no hesitation. She was more than just an antique. She was a piece of history, a fragment of a story that I needed to uncover. As I cradled her in my hands, I felt a connection, a bond that transcended time and space. This was not just a purchase, it was the beginning of a journey into the past. The shopkeeper, a frail old woman, watched me with unsettling intensity. Her eyes, though clouded with age, seemed to pierce through the very fabric of my being. It was as if she could see the curiosity and trepidation swirling within me. "Be careful with that one," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Each word seemed to carry a weight, a warning that hung in the air long after she had spoken. Her voice was not just a sound, it was a feeling, a chill that ran down my spine. She's got a way of getting under your skin. Her words did little to deter me. The doll, with its cracked face and piercing blue eyes, seemed to hold a story, a secret that begged to be uncovered. I felt an inexplicable connection, a pull that I couldn't resist. If anything, they fueled my fascination. I paid for Evelyn, eager to uncover the story behind her haunting gaze. The shopkeeper's eyes never left me, her gaze a constant reminder of the warning she had given. But my curiosity was stronger, and I left the shop with Evelyn cradled in my arms. The drive home was filled with anticipation. Rain lashed the windshield, mirroring the unease creeping into my mind. Each drop seemed to echo the shopkeeper's warning, a rhythmic reminder of the unknown that now sat in the passenger seat beside me. What had I brought into my life? The shopkeeper's warning echoed in my ears, growing louder with each passing mile. The road ahead seemed to stretch into an abyss, the darkness outside the car a stark contrast to the dim light inside. Her words were more than just a sales tactic, I could feel it. They were a premonition, a glimpse into a future that I was now a part of. The unease settled in my chest, a heavy weight that refused to lift. As I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. The doll, now sitting quietly beside me, seemed to hold the answers to questions I hadn't even thought to ask. And as I stepped out of the car, I knew that this was just the beginning of a story that would haunt me for years to come. I placed Evelyn on my nightstand. She was an antique doll, a gift from an old woman who lived down the street. Her porcelain face was delicate, almost lifelike, and her blue eyes were strikingly vivid. Her blue eyes seemed to follow me, watching my every move. It was as if she had a life of her own, hidden behind that porcelain exterior. Every time I glanced at her, I felt a chill run down my spine. The room felt different, colder. A shiver ran down my spine. The air seemed to thicken, and the shadows in the corners of the room grew darker, more menacing. It was as if Evelyn's presence had changed the very atmosphere. I dismissed it as my imagination. The old woman's words were getting to me. She had warned me about the doll, saying it had a history, a dark past. But I didn't believe in such things. I shook off the eerie feelings and tried to convince myself it was all in my head. That night, I woke with a start. The feeling of being watched intensified. My heart raced as I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The sensation was so strong it was almost tangible. My eyes darted to Evelyn. Moonlight caught her face, giving the illusion of a sly smile. It was unnerving, as if she was mocking me, enjoying my fear. The shadows played tricks on my mind, making her appear even more sinister. I sat up, heart pounding, and stared at the doll until dawn broke. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn was more than just a doll. She was something else, something that watched and waited. The next few days were filled with strange occurrences. Objects moved, temperatures dropped, whispers seemed to emanate from empty rooms. My unease grew into a chilling paranoia. Was it Evelyn? Was the shopkeeper right? Sleep offered no escape. The whispering continued, growing louder, clearer. I could almost make out words, whispers of my name laced with malice. My nights were plagued by nightmares, each one featuring Evelyn's cold, unblinking eyes. Section 5. The temperature drops. The temperature in my home became unbearable. It was as if an icy hand had gripped my house, the air thick with an unnatural chill. The change was most noticeable near Evelyn. The air around her felt frigid, almost painful to touch. I started avoiding certain rooms, the cold too intense, the feeling of dread too overwhelming. My once warm home had become oppressive, suffocating. The change was unnerving, a constant reminder of Evelyn's presence. Section 6. Shadows and movements. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision. Glances in the mirror revealed fleeting glimpses of a figure lurking just behind me, always gone when I turned around. My paranoia spiraled. Was I losing my mind? It wasn't just shadows. Objects moved. Doors creaked open and closed on their own. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and deliberate. I was living in a nightmare, haunted by an unseen entity that seemed to feed off my terror. Section 7. Consumed by Evelyn. My life revolved around Evelyn. I neglected work, friendships, even basic self-care. Days blurred into a paranoid haze. I was obsessed, consumed by the doll and the terrifying phenomena surrounding her. The whispers continued, no longer just at night. They followed me throughout the day, taunting me, threatening me. Evelyn's presence was inescapable, a suffocating weight pressing down on me. One night, I woke to a sound that chilled me to the bone. Laughter, soft, childish laughter coming from the foot of my bed. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a child's laughter. It was Evelyn's. And then, she moved. Her head turned slowly, those blue eyes boring into mine. Her porcelain lips curled into a cruel smile. I watched in horrified fascination as the doll, once inanimate, became a vessel of something truly evil. Terror lent me a burst of adrenaline. I scrambled back, heart pounding against my ribs. Evelyn's laughter grew louder, echoing through the room. Her porcelain face, once beautiful, was now twisted in a grotesque mockery of joy. She glided across the floor, her porcelain limbs moving with unnatural fluidity. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet. Evelyn was coming for me, her cold, dead eyes burning with malevolent glee. As Evelyn reached me, her laughter abruptly ceased. A cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging me into darkness. A voice, raspy and ancient, whispered in my ear. "You are mine now," it hissed, just like all the others. The voice was filled with unimaginable pain and rage. Evelyn was not just haunted, she was a conduit, a prison for something truly sinister. The darkness lifted as quickly as it had come. I lay there panting, my body trembling with terror. Evelyn was gone, vanished. But the icy chill remained, clinging to me like a shroud. I never saw Evelyn again, but her whispers still haunt me. The terror of that night remains, a chilling reminder of the evil that lurks beneath the surface of the ordinary. Some secrets are best left buried. Alex was a simple man. He lived a quiet life in a small, sleepy town nestled among rolling hills. Days were spent working at the local mill, his evenings spent in the warm glow of his fireplace, reading or listening to the radio. Life was predictable, mundane, and he liked it that way. He had his routine, his few close friends, and the comfort of anonymity. The townsfolk knew him as a gentle giant, always willing to lend a hand, always with a kind word. He was a creature of habit, finding solace in the ordinary. He knew his neighbors, they knew him. Every day seemed the same, a comfortable routine. He had no family to speak of, no lover to share his life with. He was content in his solitude, finding peace in the quiet humdrum of his existence. There were no great ambitions, no burning desires, just the simple pleasure of living each day as it came. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, a giant milky eye peering down on the world. The usually comforting light of the moon seemed different tonight, almost sinister. Alex felt a strange pull towards it, an unexplainable urge he couldn't ignore. It was a primal instinct, a whisper in the back of his mind. He felt a tightness in his chest, a shortness of breath. His bones ached, a deep throbbing pain that seemed to originate from the very marrow. An unfamiliar thirst bloomed in his throat, a craving for something he couldn't name. He tried to ignore it, to focus on his book, but the words swam before his eyes. The air grew thick, heavy with an unseen energy. The scent of pine needles and damp earth intensified, assaulting his senses. A low growl rumbled in his chest, unfamiliar and terrifying. What was happening to him? The pain hit him like a physical blow, doubling him over. His bones cracked and snapped, reforming, contorting, skin stretched taut, ripped apart by something wild and untamed surging within him. His scream echoed through the night, a tortured howl that tore from his throat. His vision blurred, the room around him dissolving into a dizzying kaleidoscope of colors. The fire in the hearth seemed to roar, the flames burning with an unnatural intensity. The once comforting scent of burning wood transformed into a cloying, suffocating smoke. His fingernails lengthened, hardened into sharp claws, teeth extended, becoming pointed fangs that glinted in the moonlight filtering through the window. He thrashed on the floor, his body no longer his own, a battleground for a war waged between man and beast. The transformation was complete. Gone was the gentle, unassuming Alex. In his place stood a creature of the night, a predator born of moonlight and shadow, a werewolf. It looked down at its hands, paws now covered in thick, coarse fur, and let out a roar that shook the very foundation of the house. Its senses were heightened, magnified 1,000-fold. The scent of pine needles was overpowering, the chirping of crickets a deafening symphony. It could hear the scurrying of small animals in the woods, feel the pulse of the earth beneath its paws. The world was alive with a vibrancy it had never known. But with this newfound awareness came a primal instinct, a bloodlust that pulsed through its veins. The scent of fear, tantalizing and sweet, drifted in from the night, awakening a hunger that could not be denied. It was time to hunt. Section 5. The hunt begins. The werewolf burst from the confines of the house, wood splintering and glass shattering under its raw power. It reveled in the cool night air against its fur, the feeling of freedom that coursed through its powerful limbs. The forest welcomed it, the shadows concealing its movements, the trees bending to its will. It moved with a speed and agility that defied its size, a blur of muscle and teeth against the moonlit backdrop. Every sense was on high alert, attuned to the slightest movement, the faintest scent. The night thrummed with life, a symphony of rustling leaves, croaking frogs, and the distant hoot of an owl. But above it all, the werewolf scented its prey, a rabbit frozen in terror, its small heart pounding against its ribs. The thrill of the chase surged through the beast, the anticipation of the kill. Section 6. Prey. The chase was short. The rabbit's fate sealed the moment it was caught in the werewolf's sights. One swift lunge and the deed was done. The forest fell silent, the only sound the heavy panting of the predator and the soft thud of the rabbit's body hitting the ground. The werewolf lowered its head, sinking its teeth into the warm flesh, the metallic tang of blood filling its mouth. The taste ignited a primal satisfaction, a dark hunger that could never be fully satiated. It fed, driven by instinct, by an ancient hunger that had no room for remorse. As it devoured its prey, a flicker of something akin to guilt, a distant echo of Alex's humanity, tried to surface. But it was quickly swallowed, consumed by the overwhelming beastly instincts that now controlled its being. Section 7. Remnants of the Beast. The first rays of dawn pierced through the trees, painting the forest floor in stripes of gold and shadow. The werewolf, sated and exhausted, felt the familiar pull of transformation, the beast within receding like a tide. Pain lanced through its body, muscles spasming, bones rearranging themselves. It whimpered, collapsing onto the forest floor, the stench of blood and musk clinging to its fur. The transformation back to human form was agonizingly slow, each twitch a fresh wave of pain. When it was finally over, Alex lay naked and trembling, the memory of the night's events washing over him in sickening waves. He looked down at his hands, now human once more, but stained with the blood of his kill. The scent of death clung to him, a horrifying reminder of the beast he harbored within. Panic surged through him, cold and suffocating. What had he become? The days that followed were pure torture. Alex was trapped in a prison of his own making, haunted by the vivid memories of the transformation, the hunt, the kill. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The image of the terrified rabbit seared into his mind. He tried to tell himself it was a nightmare, a horrific figment of his imagination. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had seen the fear in the rabbit's eyes, felt its warm blood on his tongue. The evidence was right there, in the torn and bloodied clothes he'd hidden in the back of his closet, in the lingering metallic scent that clung to his skin, no matter how hard he scrubbed. The full moon loomed, a constant terrifying reminder of his curse. He was trapped in a cycle of dread and anticipation, waiting for the inevitable transformation, praying for a way out. Driven by fear and desperation, Alex delved into ancient lore and whispered legends. He scoured dusty books, seeking a cure, a way to break the curse that had a stranglehold on his soul. He consulted local herbalists, their faces etched with fear and pity as he described his plight. He tried everything they suggested, every concoction, every ritual. He ingested bitter herbs, bathed in moonlit waters, chanted ancient incantations until his voice was hoarse. But the curse held fast, a malevolent entity that refused to be exorcised. With each passing day, the hope that had initially fueled his search dwindled, replaced by a chilling acceptance of his fate. He was a monster, and there was no escaping it. The full moon arrived again, casting its eerie glow on the world. This time, Alex didn't fight it. He had resigned himself to his fate, to the beast that resided within him. He knew he couldn't escape it, couldn't outrun it. He walked into the woods, the place where he had first tasted blood, where the animalistic part of him felt most at home. He surrendered to the transformation, embracing the pain, the primal surge of power that coursed through his veins. He was no longer the gentle, unassuming Alex. He was a creature of two worlds, forever caught between the light and the shadow. He was the beast within, and he had made peace with it. The night echoed with the werewolf's mournful howl, a sound both terrifying and heartbreaking. It was a lament for the life he had lost, for the humanity he clung to, for the curse he could not escape. He was a prisoner in his own skin, a monster bound by the cycle of the moon. And as the sun began to rise, painting the eastern sky in hues of pink and orange, the werewolf retreated deeper into the forest, disappearing among the trees. The beast within had been sated, but the curse lived on, a constant reminder of the duality of his existence. The beast within was a part of him, forever intertwined with his soul, and as long as the moon continued to rise and fall, so too would he walk the line between man and monster. His was a life forever changed, forever haunted by the beast within. The world ended not with a bang, but a bite. It was a day like any other, the sun setting over the city, casting long shadows in the alleys. People were going about their business, unaware of the impending doom. The air was thick with the usual sounds of city life, the distant hum of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, and the occasional siren. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, something sinister was brewing. One minute, life was normal, the next, chaos. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The streets once bustling with activity were now scenes of pandemonium. People were running in every direction, their faces masks of terror. Screams filled the air, a cacophony of fear and confusion. Cars were abandoned, some overturned, their contents spilling onto the asphalt. The transformation was swift and brutal. Screams ripped through the air, replacing the familiar hum of city life. The sound was deafening, a symphony of despair. People clutched at each other, seeking comfort in the midst of the chaos. The city, once a symbol of human achievement, had become a battleground. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and fear. It was a scene from a nightmare, but it was all too real. The dead walked, hungry, their eyes vacant and cold. They moved with a purpose, driven by an insatiable hunger. Their presence was a stark reminder of the fragility of life. The streets, once filled with the living, were now the domain of the dead. The fog rolled in, adding an eerie quality to the already terrifying scene. The city was unrecognizable, a shadow of its former self. I was at work, staring out the window, watching the horror unfold. The office, once a place of productivity and routine, had become a prison. My colleagues and I were trapped, helpless witnesses to the carnage outside. The glass panes separated us from the chaos, but it did little to shield us from the fear. The scenes of destruction played out like a macabre movie, each frame more horrifying than the last. People running, some collapsing. The lucky ones. They managed to find shelter, to hide from the horrors that roamed the streets. But for many, there was no escape. They fell where they stood, their bodies littering the streets. The survivors huddled behind cars, in alleyways, anywhere they could find a semblance of safety. The city had become a maze of fear, each corner hiding potential danger. The unlucky ones, they got back up, different, twisted. The transformation was grotesque, a perversion of life. Their faces, once familiar, were now twisted into masks of horror. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, their eyes devoid of any humanity. The sight was enough to drive anyone to the brink of madness. The city was no longer a place of the living, it had become a realm of the undead. Instinct took over. I barricaded myself in the office. The sound of hammering boards was a small comfort, a way to keep the terror at bay. The office, once a place of routine, had become a fortress. Each piece of furniture, each nail driven into the door, was a barrier against the nightmare outside. The darkness of the office was both a comfort and a curse, hiding me from the horrors but also isolating me in my fear. Days turned into nights. The stench of death seeped in from under the door, a constant reminder of the nightmare outside. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows, each one a potential threat. Exhaustion set in, but sleep was elusive. The sounds of the undead, the occasional scream, kept me on edge. The hallway outside was a no-man's land, littered with decaying bodies. The office had become a tomb, a place of waiting. Finally, silence. I peeked out the window. The streets were littered with bodies, both living and dead. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had reigned before. The city, once alive with activity, was now a graveyard. The bodies, twisted and broken, were a testament to the horror that had unfolded. The silence was a small mercy, a brief respite from the nightmare. It was time to move, to find others, to survive. The city was a wasteland, but there was hope. Somewhere out there, others were fighting to survive. The journey would be perilous, but staying was not an option. With a backpack of supplies and a heart full of determination, I stepped out into the unknown. The city, once a place of dreams, was now a battleground. But in the midst of the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope. Survival was the only option, and I was ready to fight for it. The city was a graveyard. Once bustling with life, now it lay in eerie silence, a testament to the chaos that had unfolded. The streets, once filled with the sounds of laughter and traffic, were now empty, echoing only the whispers of the wind. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a constant reminder of the lives lost and the battles fought. Buildings stood like hollow eyes watching. Their broken windows and crumbling facades told stories of destruction and despair. Each structure, a silent witness to the horrors that had taken place, seemed to mourn the loss of its former glory. The skyscrapers, once symbols of human achievement, now loomed like dark sentinels over the desolate landscape. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking horror. The alleys, once shortcuts for busy commuters, had become treacherous paths where danger hid in every corner. The darkness was alive, shifting and moving, playing tricks on the mind. It was as if the city itself had become a predator, waiting to pounce on the unwary. I scavenged for supplies, food, water, anything to help me survive. Each day was a struggle, a fight against hunger and thirst. The stores, once brimming with goods, were now empty shells, their shelves picked clean by desperate hands. Every find, no matter how small, was a victory, a lifeline in this harsh new world. Days later, I found them, a small group, holed up in a supermarket. They were like me, survivors clinging to the hope of a better tomorrow. The supermarket, once a place of mundane errands, had become a fortress, a sanctuary from the chaos outside. It was here that I met the people who would become my new family. John, the leader, a man hardened by the apocalypse. His eyes, once filled with kindness, now held a steely resolve. He had seen too much, lost too many, but he refused to give up. His strength and determination were a beacon of hope for the rest of us, a reminder that we could still fight, still survive. Sarah, a doctor, her eyes filled with a weary hope. She had dedicated her life to saving others, and even in this new world she continued to do so. Her medical skills were invaluable, but it was her compassion and kindness that truly set her apart. She was a light in the darkness, a reminder of the humanity we were fighting to preserve. And Mark, a young kid, barely a teenager, clinging to his sanity. The apocalypse had stolen his childhood, but not his spirit. He was brave, resourceful, and determined to survive. His innocence, though battered, was a precious thing, a symbol of the future we were all fighting for. We joined forces, our numbers, a small comfort in this new world. Together, we were stronger, more resilient. We shared our resources, our knowledge, and our hope. Each day was a battle, but we faced it together, united by our common goal, survival. We decided to head north, to the mountains, away from the city, away from the dead. The journey would be long and perilous, but it was our best chance. The mountains promised safety, a place where we could start anew. As we walked, the city faded into the distance, a haunting memory of the world we had left behind. We were escaping from hell, but we were also moving towards hope, towards a future where we could rebuild and reclaim our lives. The journey was long. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of our past was dragging us down. The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth of trees and shadows that swallowed us whole. We were driven by a singular purpose, to find a place, any place, where we could rest and feel safe, even if just for a moment. Days bled into each other, walking, scavenging, surviving. The routine was monotonous, yet it was our lifeline. We searched through the remnants of a world that once was, hoping to find anything that could sustain us. Food, water, tools. Each discovery was a small victory in our ongoing battle for survival. We avoided the main roads, sticking to the shadows, always moving. The main roads were too dangerous, too exposed. We had learned the hard way that visibility meant vulnerability. So we moved through the underbrush, our senses heightened, always alert for any sign of danger. The forest became our ally, its darkness, our shield. The silence was broken only by the crunch of gravel under our feet and the constant, gnawing fear. Every sound, every rustle of leaves set our hearts racing. The fear was a constant companion, a reminder of the peril that lurked in every shadow. Yet it was this fear that kept us alive, kept us moving. One day we stumbled upon it. It was like a mirage in the desert, an unexpected oasis in our endless journey. Our hearts leaped with a mix of hope and caution. Could this be the refuge we so desperately needed? An old hunting cabin nestled deep in the woods. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time. The walls were weathered, the roof sagging, but it stood there, a testament to resilience. It was a place that had withstood the test of time, and now it offered us a glimmer of hope. It was run down, but it offered shelter. In that moment, it was the most beautiful sight we had seen in weeks. A place where we could finally rest, even if just for a night. We approached it cautiously, our eyes scanning for any signs of danger. A roof over our heads, a fragile barrier between us and the horrors outside. The inside was as dilapidated as the exterior, but it was dry and it was ours, if only for a short while. We could hear the wind howling outside, but inside we felt a semblance of peace. We barricaded the windows, reinforced the doors. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind made us jump, but we worked together, turning the cabin into a fortress. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make us feel secure, if only for a fleeting moment. For a moment we could breathe. The tension in our shoulders eased, and we allowed ourselves to relax. We shared stories, laughed softly, and for the first time in a long while, we felt a sense of normalcy. It was a brief respite, but it was enough to rekindle our spirits. The silence of the woods, a welcome change from the city's screams. The forest, once a place of fear, now felt like a sanctuary. The absence of human noise was a balm to our weary souls. We knew this peace was temporary, but in that moment it was everything we needed. Days turned into weeks. We settled into a routine. John and I scavenged for supplies. Sarah tended to the wounded, both physical and emotional. Mark kept watch, his young eyes constantly scanning the tree line. The fear was always there, a constant undercurrent to our days. The world outside our small haven was a constant threat. But inside these walls we found a semblance of normalcy. We ate together, shared stories, clung to the remnants of hope. Section 5, Scars of the Past. John, I learned, had lost his family when the outbreak hit. His wife and daughter, gone. His grief was a heavy cloak he wore, a constant reminder of what we were all fighting for, or rather what we had already lost. Sarah, too, carried her own demons. She had seen too much death, too much suffering. Her hands, though gentle, trembled with the weight of the lives she couldn't save. We were all broken in our own ways, but we were alive, and for now, that was enough. Section 6, Trust Issues. As days turned into weeks, a new kind of fear began to creep in. The fear of the unknown, the fear of each other. Supplies were dwindling, whispers started, doubts were sown. Mark, his young mind frayed by the constant tension, started seeing things. Shadows moving in the woods, whispers in the night. John grew increasingly distant, his grief turning into a cold fury. He pushed us harder, further on scavenging runs. His trust, once a lifeline, was now a thread ready to snap. Section 7. The Calm Before the Storm. One evening, a storm rolled in. The wind howled like a banshee, shaking the cabin to its core. Thunder cracked, illuminating the sky in a blinding white light. We huddled together, our faces pale in the flickering candlelight. The storm felt like a bad omen, a harbinger of something worse to come. The air crackled with tension, thick with unspoken fear. We all knew it, felt it in our bones. Something was coming. Section 8. Night of Terror. Then it began. A low moan carried on the wind. We exchanged nervous glances. It wasn't the wind. The moan grew louder, joined by others. A chorus of the damned. The dead were upon us. John's face hardened. He grabbed his axe. "They're here." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Panic surged through the cabin. We scrambled for weapons, anything to defend ourselves. The moans were right outside the door now, scratching, clawing. Section 9. Last stand. The door burst open. A wave of rotting flesh surged inside. John met them head-on, his axe a blur of motion. Sarah, her face pale but resolute, fired her pistol. Mark, his eyes wide with terror, swung a rusty pipe. We fought with the desperation of the damned. Every swing, every shot fueled by adrenaline and fear. But for every one we put down, more seemed to rise from the darkness. Section 10. Descent into darkness. We were overrun. John barked an order. "Basement, now!" We scrambled down the rickety stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut behind us. The sounds of chaos raged above us, the moans of the dead, the splintering wood, the desperate cries of the living. We huddled together in the darkness, our chests heaving. The air was thick with the smell of blood and fear. We were trapped like rats in a cage. Section 11. No escape. Silence fell. An eerie, unsettling silence. Then I heard it, a soft thud. Footsteps. They were inside. John's face, illuminated by a flickering candle, was a mask of despair. "It's over," he whispered, his voice hollow. "We're done." He was right. There was nowhere left to run, no escape from this nightmare. We were out of time. The dead had won. The night knows me as Vlad, or it used to. Centuries blur. They steal the sharp edges of memory, leaving behind a dull ache. I am a creature of the shadows, forever bound to their embrace, or cursed by it, not even sure anymore. Time stretches, a vast and empty canvas. I am but a brushstroke upon it, a fleeting mark of darkness. Yet I remember a time when the night whispered my name with reverence and fear. A time when my touch held power, my gaze commanded obedience. Those nights were mine, the world a stage for my nocturnal symphony. But the world turns, seasons change, and even shadows fade. The world remembers me differently now. Once my visage was revered, a symbol of power and authority. Now it is but a faded memory, a ghostly echo in the annals of history. Or perhaps it doesn't remember me at all. The streets I once roamed with purpose are now silent, their stories lost to the passage of time. The echoes of my footsteps have long since faded. I am a relic, a whisper of forgotten lore. My name, once inscribed in the tomes of scholars, now lies buried beneath layers of dust. The knowledge I once possessed, now obsolete in a world that has moved on. A chill down the spine on a moonless night. The forest, once a place of refuge and strategy, now stands as a testament to the passage of time. The trees whisper secrets of battles fought and lost, of alliances forged and broken. Once I walked with kings and queens, my word, law. The throne room, now dimly lit and abandoned, was once the heart of my dominion. The walls, if they could speak, would tell tales of grandeur and betrayal, of power and its inevitable decay. My touch, a death sentence. In those days a mere gesture could seal a fate. The power I wielded was absolute, and with it came a responsibility that weighed heavily on my soul. Now, I am a ghost in the machine, a phantom flitting through the digital age. The world has changed and so have I. My presence, once physical and imposing, is now ethereal, a shadow in the vast expanse of cyberspace. The shadows have not changed, but the world they cling to is a stranger to me. The Gothic architecture, once a symbol of my era, now stands juxtaposed against the cold, unfeeling steel of modern skyscrapers. The contrast is stark, a reminder of the relentless march of time. The scent of blood, once intoxicating, now carries a metallic tang of fear. The thrill of the hunt, the exhilaration of the chase, has been replaced by a pervasive sense of dread. the world has grown more fearful, more cautious. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the predator in the dark. It is a primal instinct, one that has persisted through the ages. Even in this modern world, the shadows still hold their secrets and the darkness still conceals its dangers. I am that predator, but I am also its prey. In this new age, I am both hunter and hunted, a relic of a bygone era struggling to find my place in a world that has moved on. The echoes of my past still linger, but they are faint, drowned out by the cacophony of the present. The city is my cage, a labyrinth of concrete and steel, bathed in the artificial glow of 1,000 suns. It never sleeps, this beast of brick and mortar, and neither do I. The air hums with a constant low-frequency vibration, the pulse of humanity, amplified, distorted. It grates on my senses, a discordant symphony of need and desire. I am surrounded by life, yet utterly alone. Cameras watch my every move, their digital eyes recording my every shadow. I am a ghost, yes, but even ghosts can be captured in this age of information. Privacy is a forgotten luxury, a relic of a bygone era, just like me. She was a flicker in the darkness, a spark of life in this neon necropolis. Her eyes, wide and luminous, held a touch of the familiar, a reflection of another life, another time. Her scent, a delicate blend of lavender and fear, tugged at something primal within me, a hunger, ancient and insatiable, but also a curiosity, a yearning for something lost, something irretrievable. Her name was Anya, or maybe it wasn't. Names are easily forgotten. But her face, her eyes, they stirred something deep within me, a memory hazy and fragmented like a dream upon waking. The thirst was a familiar ache, a dull roar in the back of my mind, always present, always threatening to consume me. It pulsed in my veins, a rhythm as old as time itself. She was so close, her pulse, a steady drumbeat beneath her skin. I could smell her life force, taste its sweetness in the air. One bite, that's all it would take, one moment of surrender to the beast within. But something held me back, a flicker of something long dormant, conscience, or perhaps something more selfish, the fear of tainting the memory she evoked. Her scent was a siren's call, luring me closer to the rocks of my own destruction, lavender. She wore it like a shield, a fragile barrier against the harsh realities of the world. It was the same scent worn by another, a lifetime ago. A different city, a different life. But the memory, it lingered, sharp and painful, like a shard of glass embedded in my heart. Her name was Alara, her laughter, like the tinkling of bells in a summer breeze. Her touch, a forgotten promise of warmth. I had loved her in my own way, and I had lost her as I lose everything. The hunger raged, a wildfire in my soul. One bite, that's all it would take. To silence the craving, to feel the rush of her life force coursing through my veins. One bite and she would be mine, forever. The thought sent a chill down my spine, a stark reminder of the curse of my existence. To take her life would be to trap her in the same endless twilight that imprisoned me, to condemn her to an eternity of shadows and dust. No, I would not curse her with this existence. Not her. Not when she carried the ghost of Alara's scent, the echo of a love long lost. The past pulled at me, a siren song of blood and power. It whispered promises of strength, of a time when I was feared and revered. The allure of those days was intoxicating, a heady mix of nostalgia and raw, unbridled power. Memories of what I was, what I could be again, if I just embraced the darkness fully. The temptation was always there, lurking in the corners of my mind, urging me to let go of my restraint, to become the monster I once was. But the present held me captive, a web of surveillance and suspicion. The world had changed, evolved into a place where eyes were everywhere and secrets were hard to keep. Every corner I turned, every shadow I slipped into, there was always the risk of being seen, of being discovered. I was a predator in a world that no longer had room for predators like me. The city was a jungle of concrete and steel, but it was also a cage, confining me, limiting my movements. The thrill of the hunt was gone, replaced by the constant need to hide, to blend in. The shadows were my only refuge, the anonymity of the city my only shield. I moved through the night like a ghost, unseen and unnoticed, always on the lookout for the next safe place to hide. The darkness was my ally, but it was also my prison. To feed, to give in to the hunger, would be to risk exposure, to invite the scrutiny of a world that feared what it didn't understand. The need was always there, gnawing at me, a constant reminder of what I was, but I couldn't afford to be careless, not in this world. And so I watched her walk away. She was a beacon of light in my dark world, a reminder of what I could never have. Her presence was a fleeting moment of warmth, a brief respite from the cold, unfeeling night, a flicker of lavender disappearing into the crowd. Her scent lingered in the air, a delicate fragrance that stirred something deep within me. It was a cruel reminder of my isolation, of the life I could never lead. The scent faded, leaving behind a ghost of a memory, a phantom pain in my chest. It was a hollow ache, a reminder of the emptiness that had become my existence. I was a relic of the past, struggling to find my place in a world that had moved on without me. The decision once made left me hollow, empty. It was as if the very essence of my being had been drained, leaving behind a shell of what I once was. The echoes of my choice reverberated through the empty corridors of my mind, a haunting reminder of the path I had chosen. I had chosen to cling to the remnants of my humanity, to spare her the fate that had been thrust upon me. But at what cost? The weight of my decision bore down on me, a constant pressure that threatened to crush my spirit. I wondered if I had made the right choice, or if I had merely delayed the inevitable. The hunger still gnawed at me, a constant reminder of my nature. It was an insatiable beast, lurking just beneath the surface, always ready to pounce. Each pang of hunger was a cruel reminder of the monster I had become, a beast that could never be truly tamed. The city still felt like a cage, the lights an assault on my senses. The noise, the chaos, the relentless pace of life, it all served to remind me of how different I was, how separate. I was an outsider, a shadow moving through the world of the living, never truly belonging. But there was a sliver of something else now. Amidst the darkness, a tiny spark of something new had begun to flicker. It was fragile, delicate, like a single flower pushing its way through the cracks in the pavement. It was hope, a faint glimmer that maybe, just maybe, things could change. A flicker of hope, perhaps, or maybe it was something more profound, something deeper. It was the realization that even in the darkest of times, there is always a chance for redemption, a possibility for change. It was a small, flickering light in the vast expanse of darkness, but it was enough to keep me going, or maybe just the faintest glimmer of self-respect. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of purpose, a determination to rise above my circumstances. The broken pieces of my past no longer defined me. Instead, they became the foundation upon which I would build my future. I was still a monster, that much was true. The darkness within me was a part of who I was, an inescapable reality. But I began to see that being a monster didn't mean I had to be devoid of humanity. There was a balance to be struck, a way to coexist with the darkness without being consumed by it. But maybe, just maybe, I could choose to be a monster with a shred of a soul. It was a daunting prospect, one fraught with challenges and uncertainties. Yet, it was a path I was willing to explore, a journey I was ready to undertake. The road ahead was shrouded in mist, but I was no longer afraid to walk it. A creature of darkness capable of a sliver of light. In the end, it was not about eradicating the darkness, but about finding the light within it. It was about embracing my true self, flaws and all, and striving to be better. The choice had been made, and my destiny remained uncertain, but for the first time, I felt a sense of control over it. And that, in itself, was a victory. The night stretched before me, a familiar embrace, but it felt different now. Colder perhaps, lonelier. The memory of Anya, of her lavender scent and the ghost of Alara it evoked lingered in the air. I was condemned to walk this earth until the end of days. A solitary sentinel, forever on the outside looking in. The world would continue to change, to evolve, while I remained frozen in time, a relic of a bygone era. But even in the darkness there was a certain beauty, a stark, melancholic beauty that resonated with the hollowness in my chest. I was a creature of shadows, yes, but even shadows had their purpose. I am Vlad, or at least that is the name I cling to. A vestige of a life long gone, a world that no longer remembers my kind. I am a ghost, a whisper in the night, a monster in hiding. The city sleeps, oblivious to the creatures that roam its underbelly. But I am awake, always awake, haunted by memories and thirsts that will never be fully quenched. I am alone in a crowd, forever an outsider. This is my existence, my curse, my burden to bear. I am Vlad, the forgotten one. And this is my lament. I dare you! Kevin smirked. He slammed the basement door shut behind us. The old house groaned. "This is stupid," I muttered, my voice echoing in the oppressive darkness. The air felt thick and cold, like old, stale breath. "Are you scared?" Lisa giggled nervously. She clutched the Ouija board box like it was a life raft. "No," I lied. My heart pounded against my ribs. "We shouldn't be here. Everyone knew this house was haunted." We shuffled deeper into the basement, our sneakers kicking up dust motes that danced in the weak light filtering through a cracked window. The air hung heavy with the smell of mildew and decay. "Let's set it up over there," Mark said, pointing to a dusty old table in the corner. A shiver ran down my spine. The table looked ancient, warped with age. We huddled around the table, our shadows stretching and twisting in the flickering light. My hand trembled as I helped Lisa unpack the Ouija board. It felt ice cold beneath my fingertips. "This is so creepy," Lisa whispered. Her eyes darted around the basement as if expecting something to leap out from the shadows. The Ouija board seemed to glow in the dim light. Its polished surface reflected our nervous faces back at us, distorted and strange. The planchette, shaped like an upside-down heart, lay innocently in the center. "Okay, everyone, place your fingers lightly on the planchette," Kevin instructed. His voice sounded unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. I hesitated. My stomach churned with a growing sense of unease, but I didn't want to look scared in front of the others. So, I did as I was told. As soon as my fingers touched the smooth surface of the planchette, a jolt of static electricity shot up my arm. I gasped and pulled my hand back. "What was that?" "Relax, it's just the energy building," Kevin said, though his voice lacked its previous confidence. He placed his fingers back on the planchette, followed hesitantly by Lisa and Mark. I took a deep breath and forced myself to touch the planchette again. This time there was no shock, but the air around us seemed to crackle with an unseen energy. "Is anyone there?" Kevin asked, his voice echoing in the silence. We waited, holding our breath. The planchette remained stubbornly still. "Maybe there's no one home," Mark joked, but his laughter sounded forced. Just then the planchette shuddered, and then it began to move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the planchette began to glide across the board. It moved beneath our fingertips, dragging them along with it. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Who's doing that?" Lisa whispered, her voice tight with fear. No one answered. We watched in horrified fascination as the planchette moved from letter to letter, spelling out a word. Zachary. The name hung in the air between us, heavy and cold. A wave of icy air swept through the basement, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Who's Zachary?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. The planchette didn't move. It sat on the board, a silent, ominous presence. The air grew colder, the temperature plummeting with an unnatural swiftness. It was as if the warmth was being sucked out of the room, leaving behind a biting chill that gnawed at our bones. I could see my breath in front of my face, a ghostly plume in the dim light. Each exhale was a reminder of the eerie cold that had settled around us, making the atmosphere feel heavy and oppressive. The shadows in the corners of the basement seemed to deepen, to writhe and coil like living things. They moved with a sinister grace as if they were aware of our presence and were closing in on us. "This isn't funny anymore," Lisa whimpered, her fingers trembling on the planchette. "Let's just stop." Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a mix of fear and desperation. "Yeah, I think it's time to go," Mark agreed, his voice strained. The tension in the room was palpable, and we all felt the same urge to flee from whatever malevolent force was at play. He tried to pull his fingers away from the planchette, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if an invisible force was holding him in place, refusing to let him go. It was as if it was glued to the board. The more he struggled, the tighter the grip seemed to become, making it impossible for him to break free. "Let go, Mark!" I hissed, my own fear rising. The panic in my voice was evident, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. But Mark wasn't faking it. His eyes were wide with genuine terror, and I could see the beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cold. He was trying to pull his hand away, his face contorted with effort. Every muscle in his arm was straining, but it was no use. But the planchette wouldn't release him. It was as if it had a mind of its own, determined to keep him trapped in this nightmarish scenario. The room seemed to close in around us, the walls pressing in as our fear reached a fever pitch. We watched in horror as the planchette began to move again, this time with a swiftness that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with an unspoken dread. Each of us held our breath, eyes glued to the board, unable to look away. It darted across the board, circling and looping as if guided by an unseen hand. The letters and numbers blurred together in a dizzying dance, spelling out words that made no sense, yet filled us with an inexplicable fear. And then we heard it, a low growl, deep and guttural, emanating from the darkest corner of the basement. It was a sound that seemed to come from the very bowels of the earth, reverberating through the walls and into our bones. It was a sound that sent shivers of primal fear down my spine. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the terror that gripped me. I could see the same fear mirrored in the eyes of my friends. "What was that?" Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with terror. Her voice was barely audible, a mere breath against the oppressive silence that had fallen over us. The growl grew louder, morphing into a deep, rasping voice that seemed to slither around the room. It was a voice that carried with it the weight of centuries, ancient and malevolent. "You have awakened me." The voice echoed in the silence, each word dripping with malice. It was as if the very shadows had come to life, wrapping around us, suffocating us with their presence. Terror choked my throat. We had woken something up, something evil. The realization hit us all at once, a wave of dread that left us paralyzed. We had crossed a line, ventured into a realm we were never meant to enter, and now we had to face the consequences. An icy wind whipped through the basement, extinguishing the single light bulb and plunging us into darkness. Screams filled the air, high-pitched and terrified. I couldn't tell if they were my own. Something brushed against my leg, something cold and rough like sandpaper. I recoiled with a strangled cry, scrambling away from the unseen touch. My heart pounded against my ribs. "Get us out of here!" Kevin yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "Get us out of here now!" I fumbled for my phone, desperate for the comforting glow of its screen, but my fingers found only emptiness. I must have dropped it in the dark. We were trapped in the darkness with whatever had spoken to us. Then, 2 points of crimson light pierced the darkness. They were like twin beacons of dread, cutting through the inky blackness with an intensity that made my heart race. They glowed like hot coals, burning with an unholy fire. The light they emitted was not just red, it was a deep, malevolent crimson that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, casting eerie shadows that danced and flickered. They floated in the air, inches from the ground, and I knew instantly what I was seeing. Eyes. Evil, malevolent eyes. They seemed to hover with a purpose, as if they were searching for something, or someone. The air around them felt charged, almost electric, as if the very atmosphere was reacting to their presence. The eyes began to move, drifting closer, and a wave of pure terror washed over me. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't scream. My body felt paralyzed, rooted to the spot by an invisible force. Each step they took seemed to echo in the silence, a dreadful rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I could only stare in horrified fascination as the eyes approached, their crimson glow illuminating a grotesque, inhuman face. The face was a nightmare come to life, with features that seemed to be carved from the very essence of fear. It was a visage that defied all logic and reason, a face that belonged to the darkest of nightmares. Its skin was the color of ash, stretched taut over sharp cheekbones and a cruel, sneering mouth. The texture of its skin was almost leathery, as if it had been scorched by some infernal fire. Every line and crease seemed to tell a story of ancient evil and unimaginable suffering. 2 horns, twisted like those of a ram, protruded from its forehead. They were not just horns, they were symbols of its malevolent power, curling and twisting in a way that seemed almost organic, as if they were still growing, still evolving. And those eyes, those terrible, burning eyes, seemed to bore into my very soul. They were not just looking at me, they were looking through me, as if they could see every fear, every doubt, every dark thought I had ever had. It was a gaze that promised torment and despair, a look that assured me that I was utterly and completely at its mercy. A strangled cry escaped my lips. The creature, the demon, turned its burning gaze on me. I could feel its presence, cold and heavy, pressing down on me, smothering me. "You should not have awakened me," the demon hissed, its voice a raspy whisper that seemed to slither into my ears, filling my mind with images of death and decay. We didn't mean to," Lisa stammered, her voice trembling. "We were just playing a game." The demon's mouth twisted into a cruel smile. Games have consequences, it hissed, and now you will pay the price. Panic surged through me. We had to get out of here, now! I scrambled back, stumbling over something hard and cold. The Ouija board. Run! I screamed, scrambling to my feet, but it was too late. The demon was upon us, its laughter echoing in the darkness. I felt a searing pain in my arm, as if talons of fire were digging into my flesh. I screamed again, the sound ripped from my throat. Then, everything went black. The last thing I remember was the sound of the demon's laughter, echoing in the darkness, triumphant and cruel. We were trapped. He was Power, Vlad they called him. A name that echoed through the annals of history, whispered in hushed tones, and feared by all who heard it. His presence was a shadow that loomed over the land, a dark force that none dared to challenge. A whisper of his name sent shivers down spines. Peasants bolted their doors, their hearts pounding with dread. They knew that to speak his name was to invite his wrath, a wrath that was swift and merciless. Lords trembled in their castles, their opulent halls offering no protection from his reach. He was the night, the terror in the dark, a phantom that moved with silent precision. His reputation was a weapon, as sharp and deadly as any blade. His was a world of whispers and shadows, where fear was his constant companion. The foggy alleyways and misty streets were his domain, a labyrinth where he was the master. Every corner, every shadow held his presence, an omnipresent force that watched and waited. And he, the ultimate predator, his senses were razor-sharp, honed by years of survival and conquest. His eyes, intense and focused, could pierce the darkest night. His ears, attuned to the faintest sound, could detect the slightest movement. He could hear a heartbeat from across a crowded room, smell fear like a tang in the air. The scent of terror was his guide, leading him to his prey with unerring accuracy. In the cacophony of the city, he was a silent hunter, always aware, always alert. No secret stayed hidden. No lie went undetected. His ability to uncover the truth was unparalleled, a skill that made him both feared and respected. In the dimly lit rooms where secrets were whispered, he was the unseen listener, the shadow that knew all. He was judge, jury, and executioner. His judgments were final, his punishments severe. He was Vlad the Impaler, a name that would be etched in history as a symbol of fear and power. His reign was a shadow that cast darkness over the land, a reign that would be remembered for generations. Now, the world was a symphony of noise he couldn't decipher, a cacophony of light that blinded him. Towers of steel and glass pierced the sky, monuments to a future he didn't understand. Everywhere, the cold, unblinking eyes of cameras watched. They saw everything, recorded everything, except him. He was a ghost in this new world, a creature of darkness in a world obsessed with light. He moved through the crowds like a phantom, unseen, unnoticed, a king without a kingdom. He was adrift in a sea of faces, each one a stranger. Their thoughts and emotions were a jumbled mess, their lives meaningless and fleeting. He longed for the simplicity of his former existence, the clarity of fear, the intoxicating scent of power. Here he was nothing, a shadow in the night. He was surrounded by billions, yet utterly alone. Then, he saw her. It was as if time itself had paused, holding its breath in anticipation. His eyes locked onto her figure, and the world around him seemed to blur into insignificance. In a crowded cafe, amidst the aroma of coffee and chatter, she appeared. The clinking of cups and the hum of conversation faded into the background as his focus narrowed to just her. Her name was not Alana, but the resemblance was uncanny. Same fiery hair, cascading down her back like a waterfall of flames. It was as if the universe had played a cruel trick, bringing back a ghost from his past. Same emerald eyes that held a universe within. Those eyes, so vibrant and full of life, mirrored the ones he had lost so long ago. They seemed to pierce through the veil of time, connecting the past and the present in a single, heart-wrenching moment. the same flicker of spirit that had drawn him to his beloved centuries ago. His dead heart ached. Memories flooded back, unbidden and relentless, each one a dagger to his soul. He hadn't allowed himself to remember Alana in centuries. The pain of her loss had been too great, a wound that never truly healed. He had buried those memories deep, hoping they would never resurface. The pain was too raw, the loss too profound. But seeing this woman, this living echo of his past, it was as if the universe had conspired to remind him of what he had lost. His heart, long thought dead, began to stir with emotions he had long forgotten. This echo of his past ripped open old wounds. He felt a mix of sorrow and longing, a desperate need to reach out and touch the past, to hold on to the memory of Elena. But he knew, deep down, that this woman was not her. She was a reminder, a painful echo of a love that had transcended time itself. A heart unchanged. He watched her, a silent observer in the tapestry of her life. She was a photographer, her eyes capturing the beauty of the world through the lens of her camera. He saw the world anew through her eyes, the vibrant colors, the fleeting moments of joy and sorrow. He felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, hope, longing. He pushed the emotions down, burying them deep. He was a creature of darkness. He had no right to such light. The weight of ages. Centuries weighed heavily upon him. He carried the burden of his past like a physical weight, the memory of every life he'd taken, every soul he'd condemned to eternal darkness. He had been a monster, he had reveled in it. Now, he was filled with regret, but there was no absolution for a creature like him. A world of strangers. He was a relic of a forgotten time, a predator in a world that had moved on. The modern world was a mystery to him, its customs and technologies beyond his grasp. He was a stranger in his own existence. He watched the humans around him, their lives intertwined in a complex web of relationships and obligations. They loved, they lost, they aged, and they died. All the things he could never do. Hunger. The thirst was a constant torment, a gnawing hunger that never truly abated. He could smell their blood, their life force pulsing beneath their skin. The primal urge to feed, to take, was always there. But he couldn't. Not anymore. This world was not his hunting ground. These people were not his prey. He was a monster on a leash, his instincts shackled by his own iron will. A glimmer of light, a shadow of doubt. He found himself drawn to her light, to the warmth of her spirit. He wanted to know her, to understand this world that had created her. He wanted to feel something other than the endless, icy grip of his solitude. But what could he offer her? A creature of darkness, forever frozen in time. He was a monster, a predator, and she, a fragile, beautiful creature of light. Trapped in amber. He was trapped, frozen in time, a solitary figure in an ever-changing world. He was a ghost condemned to walk the earth, a silent observer to a life he could never truly be a part of. His existence was an echo of what it once was. He was a prisoner of his own making, his immortality, once a gift, now felt like a curse. The immortal's burden, a weight that time cannot lift, a shadow that eternity cannot dispel. He was Vlad the Impaler, a creature of darkness, a monster, once a feared ruler, now a relic of a bygone era. His name whispered in fear, his deeds etched in blood. But as he looked at the woman who reminded him so much of his lost love, he felt a flicker of something else. Hope? Regret? He didn't know. Her presence stirred memories long buried, emotions he thought he had forgotten. Could it be that even a heart as cold as his could still feel? He was a creature of contradictions, forever caught between the shadows of his past and the impossible brightness of the future. The world had changed around him, yet he remained the same, an eternal observer, never truly a part of the world he inhabited. He was an immortal, forever burdened with the weight of his past. The faces of those he had wronged haunted him, their voices a constant reminder of his sins. Each drop of rain felt like a tear shed for a life he could never reclaim. He was Vlad, and he was alone. Alone in a world that had moved on, a relic of a time that no longer existed. His immortality was not a gift, but a curse. A never-ending journey through a world that had forgotten him, a life without end, without purpose. And so, he wandered the night, a silent witness to the passage of time, forever burdened by the weight of his own existence. The air hung heavy and still, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten things. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the grime-coated windows of the thrift store, casting long, eerie shadows across the cluttered aisles. I wandered through, my gaze skimming over chipped china dolls and faded board games. Then, I saw her. She sat perched upon a shelf, nestled between a chipped teapot and a dusty stack of books. Her porcelain face, frozen in a disconcertingly cherubic smile, seemed to draw me in. Her eyes, two blue glass beads, glinted with an unnatural life. An inexplicable urge to possess her washed over me. Ignoring the voice of reason, I reached out and lifted her into my arms. Her painted porcelain skin was surprisingly cold beneath my touch, sending a shiver down my spine. Cradling the doll close, I made my way to the counter, her vacant gaze seeming to follow my every move. Lily, my 6-year-old daughter, squealed with delight when she saw the doll. Her eyes, wide with wonder, mirrored the same unsettling gleam I had seen in the doll's glass eyes. She snatched the doll from my hands, her small fingers tracing the contours of its porcelain face. "She's beautiful, Mommy," she breathed, her voice filled with awe. "Can I call her Emily?" I swallowed the unease that rose in my throat, forcing a smile. "Of course, darling," I said, ruffling her hair. "Emily it is." For days, Emily became Lily's constant companion. They were inseparable. Lily took her everywhere, to the park, to the dinner table, even to bed. The doll, propped up on the pillow beside her, seemed to watch over Lily with those unnervingly lifelike eyes. I tried to shake off the feeling of being observed, of another presence settling into the corners of our home. The first sign that something was amiss came in the dead of night. I woke with a start, my heart pounding in my chest. A soft whisper, barely audible, seemed to linger in the air. I strained to listen, my breath caught in my throat. The whisper came again, this time a little clearer, a child's voice, high-pitched and filled with an unnatural glee. I crept down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. The whispering grew louder as I approached Lily's room. Pushing open the door, I peered into the darkness. Lily lay fast asleep, her chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Emily sat perched on the nightstand, her painted smile a grotesque mockery in the shadows. Convinced it was just my imagination, I tucked Lily's blanket tighter around her and retreated to my own room. The whispering had stopped, but the silence that followed was somehow more unnerving. The next morning I tried to dismiss the events of the night as a bad dream, a trick of the mind. Yet the unsettling feeling persisted, fueled by a growing sense of unease that seemed to permeate the house. Even Midnight, our usually aloof black cat, seemed affected. He would sit outside Lily's bedroom door, his back arched, hissing at something unseen. His emerald eyes, usually bright and curious, were now narrowed, fixed on Emily with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. One evening, as Lily played with Emily in the living room, Midnight's agitation reached a fever pitch. He launched himself at the doll, a blur of black fur and razor-sharp claws. Lily screamed, scooping Emily into her arms just in time. "Midnight, no!" I scolded, scooping him up and carrying him out of the room. That night, I locked Midnight in the basement, his mournful cries adding to the growing sense of dread that had become a constant companion. Lily's usually sunny disposition began to darken. She grew withdrawn, her laughter replaced by a nervous silence. She started having nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night screaming, her small body racked with sobs. "Emily is angry with me," she cried one night, clutching me tight, her little body trembling. "She says I don't play with her enough." I tried to reassure her, to explain that dolls couldn't be angry, that it was just a bad dream. But even as I spoke, a part of me couldn't shake the chilling feeling that Lily wasn't just imagining things. The whispers continued, growing bolder, more insistent. She became possessive of Emily, refusing to let the doll out of her sight. It was as if Emily was exerting a sinister influence over my daughter, slowly twisting her innocence into something dark and unsettling. I couldn't ignore the growing unease any longer. The whispers, the nightmares, Lily's disturbing change in behavior all pointed to the doll. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, but deep down I knew the truth. Emily was not what she seemed. She was a vessel of something ancient and evil, something that had latched onto my innocent daughter. One afternoon while Lily was at school, I decided to examine the doll more closely. I held my breath, steeling myself as I reached for Emily. Her porcelain skin was ice cold, even through the fabric of her dress. I turned her over in my hands, searching for any markings, any clue to her origins. That's when I noticed it, a small, barely perceptible inscription etched into the back of the doll's neck. I held the doll closer, my heart pounding as I made out the inscription, "Beware the doll that knows." The inscription on the doll's neck confirmed my worst fears. Emily was not just a harmless toy, but a conduit for something sinister. I had to get rid of it, to protect Lily from its insidious influence. That night, I waited until Lily was sound asleep, then I crept into her room, my heart hammering in my chest. I reached for Emily, but as my fingers brushed against the doll's cold porcelain skin, I felt a jolt of static electricity shoot up my arm. The doll's head turned, its glassy blue eyes fixing on me with an unnerving intensity. Fear, primal and consuming, washed over me. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. The doll was alive. I watched in horror as the doll slowly rose from the bed, its limbs moving with an unnatural fluidity. Frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat, I watched as the doll, now hovering in midair, turned its malevolent gaze toward Lily. A low growl, guttural and menacing, emanated from its porcelain lips. Lily stirred in her sleep, a whimper escaping her lips. With a speed that defied its inanimate form, the doll shot across the room, landing on Lily's chest. Lily's eyes flew open, wide with terror, as the doll's cold porcelain hands reached for her throat. I lunged forward, screaming, but the doll was too quick. It tightened its grip, its glassy blue eyes boring into Lily's, and a chilling silence descended upon the room. Lily's struggles ceased. The doll, perched upon her chest like a grotesque puppet master, began to move Lily's limbs, forcing her to sit up in bed. "Mommy!" Lily's voice, distorted and chilling, echoed through the room. "Don't you want to play with us?" Her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her vacant eyes staring past me, fixated on something only she could see. The air grew heavy, thick with a malevolence that pressed down on me, stealing my breath. "Let her go!" I screamed, my voice raw with terror. The doll, still controlling Lily's lifeless form, turned its head towards me, a cruel smile spreading across its porcelain face. "You can't escape me." Lily's voice, now a chilling whisper, sent shivers down my spine. "She's mine now." Desperation clawed at me, fueling a surge of adrenaline. I couldn't let this thing take my daughter. I had to fight for Lily's soul, for our lives. Remembering the inscription on the doll's neck, a spark of hope ignited within me. The doll, still perched on Lily's chest, tilted its head, as if considering my question. Lily's lips curled into a grotesque smile, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too pointed for a child her age. "It means," Lily's voice, now a chilling rasp, sent shivers down my spine. "That knowledge is power, and I know your deepest fears." The room seemed to warp around me, the air thick with a suffocating dread. Images flashed before my eyes, my worst fears, my deepest regrets, all manipulated, twisted into grotesque spectacles by the entity that now controlled my daughter. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting against the wave of terror that threatened to consume me. "You can't win!" I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. "I won't let you have her." Remembering the cat's reaction to Emily, a desperate plan began to form in my mind. "You think you're so strong?" I spat, my voice laced with a defiance I barely felt. "But you're nothing but a parasite, feeding off a child's innocence." I saw a flicker of anger in the doll's painted eyes, a momentary lapse in its control. That was my chance. I lunged for Lily, scooping her up in my arms, and raced out of the room. I could hear the doll's enraged screams echoing behind me, its voice laced with a fury that sent chills down my spine. I ran to the basement door, fumbling with the lock, my heart pounding against my ribs. I threw open the door and released Midnight, his emerald eyes widening in surprise before fixing on the figure that emerged from the shadows. The doll, hovering in midair, Its porcelain face, contorted in a mask of rage, launched itself at me, but before it could reach us, midnight pounced, a blur of black fur and razor-sharp claws. A piercing shriek echoed through the house, followed by an eerie silence. I stood there, my breath ragged, my arms wrapped tightly around Midnight, as the silence stretched on. The doll was gone. Lily, still unconscious, lay limp in my arms, her breathing shallow but steady. We were safe for now. The flea market buzzed with activity. Sunlight glinted off dusty trinkets. I wandered through the crowded aisles, searching for nothing in particular. My eyes fell upon a stall tucked away in a dimly lit corner. An ornate antique mirror leaned against a stack of old books. Its frame, carved from dark wood, was intricately detailed with grotesque figures. The glass itself seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. An unnatural pull drew me closer. I felt compelled to touch it, to own it. The stall owner, a wizened old woman with sharp eyes, watched me intently. She named a surprisingly low price. Without hesitation, I handed over the money. I knew I had to have this mirror despite a growing unease. I couldn't explain the sudden obsession. I carefully wrapped the mirror in an old blanket. I carried it back to my car, the weight of the mirror feeling heavier than it should. I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. A sense of foreboding washed over me, but I dismissed it as the heat of the day. Back home, I placed the mirror in my bedroom. The room felt different, colder. The mirror's presence seemed to darken the space. The ornate carvings on the frame seemed more sinister now, the grotesque figures appearing to writhe. I stood before the mirror, gazing at my reflection. My face looked pale, my eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and fear. The mirror seemed to distort my image slightly, making me look older, more haggard. My cat, Midnight, a sleek black creature, hissed at the mirror. He arched his back, his fur standing on end. He refused to enter the room, staying crouched in the doorway, his yellow eyes fixated on the mirror. A cold draft snaked through the room despite the closed windows. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe. The silence in the room was broken only by the frantic beating of my heart. An unsettling feeling of dread settled over me. Night fell, and the whispers began. Soft, indistinct murmurs seemed to emanate from the mirror. I strained to hear, but the words remained elusive. The whispers were like a swarm of insects buzzing just outside my range of hearing. I tried to ignore the whispers, telling myself it was just the wind, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be calling my name, beckoning me closer to the mirror. Sleep became impossible. Midnight continued to avoid the room. He would sit outside the door, yowling mournfully. His behavior was unnerving. He seemed to sense something I couldn't. The temperature in the room plummeted. I wrapped myself in blankets, but the cold seeped into my bones. The room felt oppressive, suffocating. I began to question my sanity. Midnight's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He paced restlessly outside the bedroom door, scratching at the wood. He would hiss and spit at the closed door, as if something menacing lurked within. One night I awoke to find Midnight perched on my dresser, staring intently at the mirror. His eyes were wide with terror. He let out a low growl, a sound I had never heard him make before. I tried to soothe him, but he recoiled from my touch. He jumped down from the dresser and darted out of the room, his tail puffed out like a bottle brush. He never returned. The whispers intensified, morphing into chilling pronouncements. I could now make out fragmented phrases, ominous warnings about my future. The mirror's surface began to ripple like disturbed water. Section 5. Shifting Reflections. My own reflection in the mirror began to change. My face aged before my eyes, wrinkles appearing on my forehead, my hair turning gray. The reflection was no longer my own. It was a distorted, grotesque version of myself. The mirror showed fleeting images of unfamiliar places, a dark, winding corridor, a shadowy figure lurking in the corner of a room, a flash of bright red like blood. The visions were brief, fragmented, but undeniably disturbing. They felt like premonitions, glimpses into a terrifying future. The mirror was no longer just reflecting my present, it was showing me what was to come. Fear gnawed at me, a constant, icy presence in my gut. I tried to cover the mirror with a sheet, but it seemed to repel the fabric. The mirror's pull was too strong. I was trapped in its web of horror. Section 6. A glimpse of tomorrow. One night the mirror showed me a clear vision of my own death. I saw myself slipping on a wet floor, my head striking the edge of the bathtub. The vision was vivid, horrifyingly real. I saw the blood pooling around my head, staining the white porcelain red. My lifeless eyes stared up at the ceiling. The vision ended abruptly, leaving me trembling with terror. I knew then that the mirror was not just showing me the future, it was orchestrating it. The mirror was a conduit to some dark, malevolent force. It was using me as a pawn in its twisted game. The whispers intensified, mocking my fear. They spoke of my impending doom, reveling in my despair. I was trapped, helpless, waiting for the inevitable. Section 7. The Corridor of Fear. The visions became more frequent, more detailed. The dark corridor I had glimpsed earlier appeared again and again. It seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness, lined with doors that appeared to breathe. I felt a compulsion to enter the corridor, a morbid curiosity drawing me in. I knew it was a trap, but I couldn't resist. The mirror's influence was too powerful. The whispers urged me forward, promising answers, offering a glimpse into the unknown. I knew it was a lie, but I was too far gone to care. I was consumed by fear, driven by a desperate need to understand. The temperature in my bedroom dropped to freezing. The air grew thick with a cloying metallic scent. The room felt like a tomb, and I was its willing occupant. Section 8. The Inevitable Reflection. I found myself standing before the mirror, my reflection shimmering and distorting. The reflection no longer resembled me. It was a skeletal figure, its eyes burning with an unholy light. The whispers reached a crescendo, filling my ears with a cacophony of terror. I could feel the mirror's pull, dragging me closer, drawing me into its depths. I tried to turn away, to break free from its grasp, but it was too late. The mirror held me captive, its icy grip tightening around my soul. The vision of my death replayed in my mind, a constant loop of horror. I knew it was coming. I could feel the cold, hard surface of the bathtub beneath my feet. Section 9. A Bloody Premonition. The bathroom floor was wet. I had just finished showering, the steam still clinging to the air. The mirror's premonition flashed before my eyes, a chilling reminder of my impending fate. I reached for a towel, my hand trembling. I knew I should be careful, but a strange sense of fatalism washed over me. It was as if I was being compelled to fulfill the prophecy. The whispers echoed in my ears, urging me forward, sealing my doom. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I was watching myself from outside my body. My foot slipped on the wet tile. I reached out to steady myself, but it was too late. I felt myself falling, the world tilting around me. Section 10. The Final Slip. My head struck the edge of the bathtub with a sickening thud. I felt a sharp pain, a blinding flash of white light. The world went black. I lay there, sprawled on the cold tile, blood pooling around my head. My eyes stared up at the ceiling, just as I had seen in the mirror's vision. The whispers faded, replaced by a deafening silence. The mirror's reign of terror was over. It had claimed its victim. My lifeless body lay in a pool of blood, a testament to the mirror's power. The premonition had come true. Section 11. Shattered Fate. The mirror remained in the bedroom, its surface now cracked and clouded. The dark wood frame seemed to weep a viscous black substance. The grotesque figures carved into the frame appeared to be celebrating their victory. The house stood empty, silent, a monument to a tragedy foretold. The mirror's curse lingered, waiting for its next victim. The whispers began anew, soft and indistinct, searching for a new ear to torment. The cycle of horror would continue. The haunted mirror remained, a dark portal to a terrifying future, forever reflecting shattered fates. The old house groaned, its ancient timbers protesting against the weight of years. It shifted on its foundation, a sound like bones settling, echoing through the empty halls. The basement door, warped and scarred from decades of neglect, creaked open with a reluctant moan. It was a slow, agonizing yawn, revealing a set of stairs that disappeared into the black, as if inviting the unwary to descend. A single bare bulb cast a sickly yellow light, barely penetrating the oppressive darkness that seemed to breathe from the bottom of the steps, its flicker a heartbeat in the gloom. The air grew thick and heavy, a cloying blend of mildew, damp earth, and something faintly metallic, like the scent of old blood. It was the smell of forgotten things, of secrets better left buried, of memories that had long since decayed. But curiosity, like a moth drawn to a flickering flame, drew a group of teenagers down those creaking steps and into the basement's cold embrace, their laughter fading into nervous whispers. They couldn't have known what waited for them in the darkness, the unseen eyes watching their every move. They didn't know this was more than a basement, more than just a room beneath the house. It was a hungry maw, ready to swallow them whole, a place where nightmares were born and fed on the unwary. There were 5 of them, huddled in a circle on the cold concrete floor. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere that seemed to close in on them. The air hung thick and heavy with nervous anticipation, almost as if it were alive, pressing down on their shoulders and making it hard to breathe. Each held their breath, their eyes darting between the worn wooden planchette resting on the Ouija board and the faces of their friends. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling. There was Mark, the skeptic, rolling his eyes and muttering about childish games. He had always been the one to question everything, never believing in the supernatural. Next to him sat Jessica, her face pale, knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the board. She had been hesitant to join, but her curiosity had gotten the better of her. Across from them, Emily, the adventurous one, tried to mask her apprehension with a shaky smile. She was always up for a thrill, but this was pushing her limits. Her boyfriend David sat beside her, his hand protectively covering hers on the planchette. He was trying to be brave for her sake, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. Completing the circle was Sarah, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. She had always been intrigued by the unknown, and this was her chance to explore it. She was the one who had brought the Ouija board, convinced it was the key to contacting the other side. Her determination was palpable, and she had managed to convince the others to join her in this experiment. The air crackled with their combined anxieties, a potent cocktail of fear and nervous excitement. They were on the brink of something unknown, and the anticipation was almost too much to bear. Each of them wondered what would happen next, their minds racing with possibilities both thrilling and terrifying. "Is anyone there?" Sarah's voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. The others held their breath, their gazes glued to the planchette. It sat motionless for a moment, an inanimate piece of wood. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, it began to move. It twitched, then glided across the board, stopping briefly on each letter. H-E-L-L-O. The word hung in the air, heavy and cold. The teenagers stared at each other, a mixture of disbelief and terror etched on their faces. Mark scoffed, attributing it to someone pushing the planchette, but the others weren't so sure. There was something about the way it moved, smooth and deliberate, that sent chills down their spines. The air grew colder, a draft swirling around their feet as if something unseen had been disturbed. The basement, never warm to begin with, grew noticeably colder. A damp chill, like a clammy hand, settled over the room. The single light bulb flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced on the walls, making the already cramped space feel smaller, more suffocating. Jessica shivered, pulling her sweater tighter around her. "It's freezing down here," she whispered, her voice trembling. David, trying to sound brave, told her it was just an old house, probably drafty. But even he couldn't ignore the prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The Ouija board seemed to hum with an energy of its own, the planchette vibrating slightly under their fingertips. Something was different. The air felt charged, electric with anticipation. "Who are you?" Emily asked, her voice small and hesitant. The planchette, as if responding to her fear, began to move with renewed purpose. It zipped across the board, stopping briefly on each letter, spelling out a name that sent a wave of terror through the group. Zalgo. The name hung in the air, heavy and malevolent. No one dared to speak. Mark, his skepticism finally cracking, stammered, "What does that even mean?" But deep down, they all knew. This wasn't some harmless prank. This was something else entirely. Something dark. Something evil. A low growl, guttural and chilling, echoed from the darkness beyond the circle of light. The teenagers froze, their blood turning to ice in their veins. Then, 2 points of crimson light materialized in the shadows, like embers burning in the dark. The eyes pulsed with a malevolent energy, watching them, studying them. A wave of pure terror washed over the group. Jessica whimpered, burying her face in her hands. David, his bravado gone, instinctively pulled her close. Mark, his face ashen, muttered a string of apologies, begging whatever it was to leave them alone. But the eyes only seemed to burn brighter, their malevolent gaze fixed on the terrified teenagers. The growl intensified, morphing into a guttural voice that seemed to ooze from the very walls of the basement. "You have summoned me," it rasped, each word sending shivers down their spines. "And now, you will face the consequences." Panic gripped the teenagers. They scrambled to their feet, knocking over the Ouija board in their haste to escape. The planchette clattered to the floor, landing face down. But the basement door, which had swung open so easily before, wouldn't budge. It was as if an unseen force was holding it shut. They were trapped, their escape route sealed by something ancient and evil. Section 8. Trapped. They rattled the doorknob, kicked at the warped wood, but the door wouldn't give. It was like pushing against a wall of solid rock. Their hearts pounded in their chests, each breath a shallow gasp. The temperature plummeted further, the air thick with the stench of sulfur. The shadows seemed to writhe and coil around them, tendrils of darkness reaching out like grasping claws. The 2 crimson eyes bored into them, filled with a chilling amusement. They were mice caught in a trap, their every move observed by the predator that had lured them into its lair. Fear, raw and primal, coursed through their veins. They were at the mercy of something ancient and evil, something that had been waiting for them in the darkness. Section 9. The Promise. The voice, closer now, boomed around them, shaking the very foundation of the house. "You sought knowledge," it said, a low rumble that vibrated in their chests. "And knowledge you shall have." The shadows swirled faster, coalescing around the spot where the eyes burned with unholy light. The air crackled with energy, raising goosebumps on their skin. They huddled together, their eyes squeezed shut, bracing for what they knew was coming. The voice, now a whisper directly in their ears, sent chills down their spines. "I will show you things you can't even imagine," it hissed. "Things that will haunt your waking hours and torment your dreams." Section 10. A Glimmer of Hope. Just when the teenagers thought all hope was lost, a glimmer of light appeared in the darkness. It wasn't much, just a faint glow emanating from Sarah's backpack. She had dropped it in their panicked scramble, and now it lay open, revealing a small silver crucifix nestled among her belongings. The crucifix, a gift from her grandmother, pulsed with a soft, warm light, a stark contrast to the cold, malevolent energy that permeated the basement. The growls and hisses seemed to falter, the shadows recoiling slightly from the sacred symbol. Could this be their salvation? Could a simple crucifix hold back the forces of darkness that threatened to consume them? Section 11. The haunting continues. The demonic presence recoiled, its guttural growl laced with a hint of frustration. It was as if the entity was momentarily thwarted, its malevolent intentions interrupted by an unseen force. The shadows retreated, the glowing red eyes flickering momentarily before vanishing into the darkness. The room, once filled with an oppressive presence, now felt eerily empty, as if the very air had been sucked out. The basement door creaked open, as if released from an unseen grip. The sound echoed through the house, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces at play. The teenagers, their bodies trembling with terror and adrenaline, didn't hesitate. Their eyes wide with fear, they exchanged frantic glances, silently agreeing on the need to escape. They scrambled out of the basement, each desperate breath of victory. Their footsteps echoed loudly, a cacophony of fear and urgency, as they raced towards the safety of the upper floors. But they knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. The sense of dread clung to them, a dark shadow that refused to be shaken off. The experience had marked them, branded their souls with the chilling memory of that night. Their eyes, once filled with youthful innocence, now held a haunted look, a reflection of the horrors they had witnessed. The basement, once a place of childish curiosity, was now a symbol of terror, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their ordinary lives. It had transformed from a place of innocent exploration to a chamber of nightmares. And the Ouija board? It lay forgotten on the cold concrete floor, a silent testament to the night they learned that some doors are best left unopened, some knowledge too terrifying to possess. The board, once a tool of curiosity, now seemed like a portal to unimaginable horrors. For they had glimpsed the abyss, and the abyss had glimpsed back. The encounter had left an indelible mark on their souls, a reminder that the line between our world and the unknown is perilously thin. The old Victorian house stood on a hill overlooking the town, its silhouette a stark contrast against the evening sky. Grand and imposing, it held an allure, a promise of a new beginning for our family. The intricate details of its architecture whispered tales of a bygone era, inviting us to become part of its storied history. We were captivated by its charm, overlooking the whispers of its past. The house seemed to beckon us with open arms, its grandeur masking the secrets it held within its walls. The air was thick with anticipation as we crossed the threshold, our laughter echoing in the cavernous rooms. Each step we took resonated with the promise of new memories to be made, new stories to be written. We were home. The sense of belonging was immediate, as if the house had been waiting for us all along. The first few days were filled with unpacking and exploring. Every corner of the house held a new discovery, a new piece of its history revealed. We reveled in the home's history, each creaking floorboard and ornate fixture a testament to its past. The antique furniture and vintage decor spoke of a time long gone, yet somehow still present in every room. We felt like characters in a storybook, living amongst the echoes of generations past. The walls seemed to whisper their secrets to us, sharing the joys and sorrows of those who had come before. Little did we know, the story of this house was far from over. As night fell, the house took on a different character, its shadows deepening, its silence growing more profound. The flickering lights hinted at mysteries yet to be uncovered, adventures yet to be had. Our journey in this old Victorian house was just beginning, and we were eager to see where it would lead us. The first sign that something was amiss was subtle. A book misplaced, a faint scent of lavender in the air, as if someone had just walked by, leaving a trace of their presence. A floorboard creaking when no one was near, echoing through the silence of the night. We dismissed these occurrences as the house settling, its old bones adjusting to our presence. After all, it was an old house, full of history and memories. We were, after all, still strangers in its embrace, trying to make it our home. As days turned into weeks, the incidents became more frequent, more pronounced. Doors creaked open on their own, objects moved inexplicably, as if guided by unseen hands. A sense of unease began to settle over us, a feeling of being watched, of being judged. It was as if the house itself was alive, observing our every move. We were no longer alone in our new home. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of our vision, and whispers echoed in the hallways at night. We tried to rationalize it, to find logical explanations, but the feeling of being watched never left us. The house had secrets, and it seemed determined to share them with us. We were caught in a web of the past, unable to escape its grasp. The whispers of the past had become our present, and we could no longer ignore them. The cold spots were the first tangible evidence that something was truly wrong. Pockets of icy air, localized and intense, clung to certain areas of the house. They moved unpredictably, defying logic and explanation. The air grew heavy in these spots, charged with an unseen energy. My youngest daughter, Lily, was the most sensitive to these disturbances. She refused to enter certain rooms, her eyes wide with fear. She spoke of feeling cold, of someone breathing on her neck. Her innocent words sent chills down my spine, a primal fear taking root in my heart. With each passing day, the activity intensified. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, faint and indistinct, yet undeniably human. Shadows danced at the edge of our vision, fleeting glimpses of movement that vanished upon closer inspection. The air grew thick with dread, a suffocating blanket of fear. Sleep became a distant memory. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against the window panes, sent our hearts racing. We were prisoners in our own home, trapped by the unseen forces that were closing in around us. The tension culminated one night in Lily's room. A blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, jolting us from our restless sleep. We rushed to her room, hearts pounding in our chests, only to find her cowering in the corner, her eyes wide with terror. "It's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The lady in the white dress." She pointed to the doorway where a translucent figure hovered in the dim light. The ghostly apparition stared at us with hollow eyes, its presence sending a wave of icy fear through our veins. The encounter with the ghost shattered any remaining doubt. We were living in a haunted house held captive by an entity with a malevolent agenda. The paranormal activity escalated, becoming bolder, more aggressive. Objects flew across the room, disembodied voices taunted us, and the temperature plummeted to bone-chilling levels. Fear became our constant companion. We moved through the house like shadows, our nerves frayed, our spirits broken. The once welcoming abode had transformed into a prison, its walls closing in on us, suffocating us with its oppressive presence. We were trapped, ensnared in a web of terror we couldn't escape. The house held us captive, its unseen occupant toying with us, reveling in our fear. Every corner held a memory of terror, every shadow a promise of impending doom. Sleep offered no respite, haunted by nightmares of spectral figures and icy whispers. Our waking hours were consumed by fear, dreading the next manifestation of the supernatural, the next encounter with the unknown. We were living a nightmare, and there seemed to be no escape. Desperate for answers, we delved into the history of the house, scouring old records, interviewing townsfolk. We discovered a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and murder. The previous owner, a young woman named Eliza, had been brutally killed by her jealous husband. Her spirit, unable to find peace, remained trapped within the walls, seeking revenge for her untimely demise. The cold spots, the whispers, the ghostly apparitions, all pointed to Eliza's tormented soul. The truth, however horrifying, offered a glimmer of understanding. Eliza's pain, her rage resonated within the very foundation of the house. She was not a malevolent entity, but a wounded soul seeking solace, seeking justice. We realized that we were not just battling a ghost, but confronting a tragic past. Eliza's story needed to be told, her pain acknowledged, her spirit set free. Only then could we hope to find peace within the walls of the haunted house. We gathered in the room where Eliza had met her demise, our hearts heavy with empathy for the soul trapped within these walls. We spoke to her spirit, acknowledging her pain, her anger, her sorrow. We promised to share her story, to ensure that she was never forgotten. As we spoke, the air grew heavy, charged with emotion. The temperature dropped and a cold wind swept through the room, and then silence. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of peace, of closure. We left the house that night, our hearts heavy with the weight of Eliza's story. The air was thick with an unspoken fear, a sense of dread that clung to us like a shadow. Each step away from that old Victorian house felt like a step into the unknown, a journey away from the tangible and into the realm of the unseen. While the paranormal activity had ceased, the memory of our encounter lingered, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces that surround us. The eerie silence of the house was replaced by the haunting echoes of our own thoughts. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind seemed to carry the weight of the past, a past that refused to be forgotten. We may have escaped the haunted house, but we knew that we could never truly escape the grip of the unseen, The fear had seeped into our very bones, a constant reminder that the world is not as it seems. The house had let us go, but it had left its mark, a scar that would never fully heal. The experience left an indelible mark on our souls, a constant reminder that some doors are best left unopened, some mysteries better left unsolved. The house had shown us a glimpse of the darkness that lies hidden within us all, a darkness that we must confront and understand if we are to find peace. Some secrets better left buried. The old Victorian house stood as a testament to the unknown, a monument to the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of our understanding. It was a place where the past and the present collided, where the living and the dead coexisted in a fragile balance. For within the walls of that old Victorian house, we had confronted not only a ghost, but the darkness that lies hidden within us all. It was a journey into the depths of our own fears, a confrontation with the unknown that left us forever changed. The house may have been haunted, but it was our own ghosts that we had to face, our own fears that we had to overcome. Dr. Emily Carter had always been captivated by time. From a young age, she found herself lost in the pages of history books, dreaming of the past and the future. Time was not just a sequence of moments for her, it was a vast, uncharted ocean filled with mysteries waiting to be uncovered. It wasn't simply a measurement, but a vast ocean she longed to explore. The ebb and flow of time fascinated her, much like the rhythmic waves of the sea, each one carrying secrets from different eras. Years dedicated to her research had culminated in this moment, the creation of her time machine. Countless nights spent in her dimly lit laboratory, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the scent of old books, had finally paid off. Its metallic arcs hummed with contained energy, a symphony of science only she could orchestrate. The machine was a marvel of Victorian engineering, a testament to her relentless pursuit of knowledge and her unwavering belief in the impossible. Tonight, she would walk the cobblestone streets of 1890. The thought of stepping into a world she had only read about filled her with a sense of wonder and anticipation. Tonight, she would dance with the ghosts of history. She imagined the figures she would meet, the stories she would hear, and the moments she would witness firsthand. Emily adjusted the dials on her wristwatch-like control panel. Each turn of the dial brought her closer to her dream, the culmination of years of hard work and dedication. The air crackled with anticipation. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if the very fabric of time was waiting for her to take the plunge. Excitement thrummed through her veins, a potent cocktail of fear and exhilaration. She knew the risks involved, but the promise of discovery far outweighed her fears. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the machine, the metal cold against her fingertips. The sensation grounded her, reminding her of the reality of her endeavor. With a final glance back at her lab, she initiated the sequence. The familiar surroundings of her laboratory began to blur, replaced by the unknown. She was ready to embark on a journey through time, to explore the centuries that had always captivated her imagination. The world dissolved into a blinding white vortex. Emily felt a sickening lurch in her stomach, a disorienting sense of falling through herself. Sounds warped and twisted, her own heartbeat a frantic drum against the cacophony. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The white faded, replaced by an oppressive darkness. Emily gasped, scrambling to her feet. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of coal smoke and something indefinably ancient. A wave of nausea washed over her, her senses reeling as her body adjusted to the temporal shift. As her eyes slowly acclimated to the dim light, she realized with a growing sense of unease that she wasn't in her lab anymore. Cobblestone streets stretched out before her, slick with a mixture of rain and mud. Gaslights flickered, casting dancing shadows on the buildings that lined the street. Horse-drawn carriages rattled past, their drivers bundled in thick coats against the biting chill. She had made it. 1890. But as Emily took in her surroundings, a shiver ran down her spine. There was an unsettling stillness beneath the surface bustle of the city. Whispers seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, too faint to discern, but heavy with an unknown dread. The air hummed with an energy that felt ancient and profoundly unsettling. The initial thrill of time travel was quickly turning to ice in Emily's veins. Her attempts to return to her own time were met with a chilling silence from the machine. It stood cold and inert, its power extinguished. She was trapped. The shadows seemed to lengthen around her, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes at the edge of her vision. She felt a constant prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the chilling certainty that she was being watched. The city, once brimming with historical allure, now felt like a suffocating cage, its beauty tainted with a palpable sense of menace. Section 5. The Man in the Brass Frames. One evening, as Emily sought refuge in a dimly lit tavern, she noticed him. The tavern was a sanctuary for weary souls, a place where the flickering candlelight and the scent of aged wood offered a brief respite from the harsh world outside. He sat alone in a corner booth shrouded in shadows. The dim light barely touched him, as if he were a part of the darkness itself, an extension of the tavern's most hidden corners. His gaunt face, framed by a shock of white hair, was as pale as bone. The stark contrast between his hair and his skin made him look almost ghostly, a specter from another time. His eyes, two dark pits in his skull, seemed to bore into her, reflecting an ancient and profound sorrow. They were eyes that had seen too much, eyes that carried the weight of countless untold stories and unspoken regrets. He didn't speak, but his presence filled the room, a chilling weight that settled over her like a shroud. It was as if the very air around him was charged with a heavy, oppressive energy that made it hard to breathe. Emily tried to ignore him, to focus on the warmth of the watered-down ale in her hands. She took a sip, hoping the liquid would calm her nerves, but it did little to ease the growing unease that gnawed at her. But his gaze was relentless, a tangible thing that seemed to claw its way under her skin, burrowing deep into her bones. It was as if he could see right through her, peeling back the layers of her soul to expose her deepest fears and insecurities. The tavern, once a place of refuge, now felt like a trap, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into something far darker and more sinister than she could have ever imagined. Section 6. A City of Whispers. The whispers grew stronger. They seemed to emanate from the very shadows themselves, hissing her name, drawing her deeper into the labyrinthine streets. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued her, visions of twisting shadows and the gaunt man's accusing eyes. Emily's days blurred into a terrifying, unending present. She was a ghost in a city that was never meant for her. The fear was a constant companion, gnawing at her sanity, whispering that she would be forever lost in this time, a prisoner of the past. Section 7. The Face in the Mirror. Each day, Emily felt her grip on her own identity slipping. The face that stared back at her from the cracked mirror in her rented room was gaunt, her eyes shadowed with fear. She looked like a woman on the edge of oblivion. The line between the real and the unreal blurred. Were the shadows truly alive, or were they figments of her unraveling mind? Was the gaunt man a figment of her imagination, a physical manifestation of her growing terror, or was he something far more ancient, far more sinister? Section 8. The clock stops ticking. Time lost all meaning. Days and nights melted into an unending spiral of fear and despair. She had abandoned all hope of repairing the time machine. It lay dormant in the corner of her room, a mocking reminder of her hubris. Emily was adrift in a sea of time with no anchor, no direction. The past had become her prison, its grip tightening with each passing moment. She was no longer a visitor but a captive, ensnared by a force she couldn't comprehend. Section 9. Lost in the Labyrinth. One particularly dark night, Emily found herself lost in a maze of narrow alleyways. The oppressive darkness seemed to press in on her, suffocating her, stealing the air from her lungs. The whispers were deafening now, swirling around her, taunting her, pulling her deeper into the heart of the labyrinth. Panic welled up inside her, threatening to consume her. She ran, her breath catching in her throat, her footsteps echoing on the damp cobblestones. But there was no escape. The alley seemed to stretch on forever, a twisting, turning testament to her impending doom. Section 10. Embraced by shadows. The shadows reached for her, tendrils of darkness snaking out from the walls, cold and clammy against her skin. She thrashed, screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence of the alley. The gaunt man materialized before her, his face a mask of sorrow and something akin to pity. His touch was icy, sending a jolt of fear through her that turned her blood to ice. He leaned closer, his breath a cold whisper against her ear. "This is your time now," he rasped, his voice hollow and ancient. "You are home." As Section 11, The Ghosts of Tomorrow. Emily's struggles ceased. The relentless battles she had fought, the endless nights of fear and uncertainty all seemed to dissolve into the mist around her. The fear that had consumed her for so long simply evaporated, replaced by a strange sense of acceptance. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders, and she could finally breathe freely. She was no longer Dr. Emily Carter, brilliant scientist, time traveler. The titles and accolades that once defined her seemed meaningless now. She had ventured into the unknown, seeking answers, but had found something far more profound. She was simply another shadow, another whisper in the fabric of time. The alleyways and streets of the Victorian era had become her new home, a place where she could exist without the burdens of her past. As the shadows enveloped her, she thought she saw a flicker of light in the distance, a faint glimmer of her own time. It was a reminder of the world she had left behind, a world that seemed so distant and unreachable now. But it was too late. The past had claimed her, its grip unyielding, its embrace eternal. She had become a part of the very history she had once studied, a living relic of a bygone era. The past had claimed her, its grip unyielding, its embrace eternal. The forces of time had pulled her back, refusing to let her go. She was trapped in a loop, a never-ending cycle of existence in a time that was not her own. Dr. Emily Carter was gone, lost in the annals of time, destined to wander the streets of 1890 forevermore, a ghost of the future trapped in the past. Her story would become a legend, a cautionary tale for those who dared to tamper with the fabric of time. She was a reminder that the past is not a place to be visited lightly, and that the consequences of such journeys can be profound and irreversible. It started with a dare, as these things often do. A simple challenge thrown out to break the monotony of a typical Friday night. A group of us, bored teenagers on a Friday night, looking for a thrill. We were restless, craving something more than the usual hangout spots in video games. Someone mentioned Willow Creek Asylum. It was a local legend, a place whispered about in hushed tones, the kind of place that dared you to test your courage. An abandoned asylum with a dark history. Stories of mistreated patients and ghostly apparitions filled our minds. I should have walked away right then, but the thrill was too tempting. But curiosity, like a siren's call, drew me in. We piled into Mark's beat-up Jeep, the engine groaning in protest. The vehicle was as old and worn as the stories we had heard. The headlights cut through the darkness as we drove further and further away from civilization. The road seemed endless, each mile taking us deeper into the unknown. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of apprehension. We pulled up to the gates, rusted metal twisted like grotesque claws. The sight alone was enough to make anyone second-guess their decision. The air grew heavy, thick with a silence that felt almost predatory. A dense fog began to roll in, adding to the eerie atmosphere. This was a place where even the air held its breath, a place where fear was not a visitor, but a permanent resident. The shadows seemed to move, and every creak of the old building sent shivers down our spines. We were in too deep to turn back now. The asylum loomed before us, a Gothic monolith against the night sky. Its crumbling facade was like a decaying skull, windows like empty sockets staring back at us. A shiver ran down my spine, and I pulled my jacket tighter around myself. The wind howled through the trees, sounding like the screams of tortured souls. It was the kind of night that sent chills crawling down your spine. Even the bravest among us hesitated, but we had come too far to turn back now. We pushed open the creaking gates, the metal groaning in protest. The sound echoed through the night, amplified by the oppressive silence. It felt like we were stepping into the mouth of a monster. The air inside was stale and heavy, thick with the smell of decay and something else. It was as if the very walls were exhaling the memories of a forgotten past, each breath laden with the weight of time. Something unnameable, but undeniably sinister. It clung to the shadows, whispering secrets that were never meant to be heard. Dust motes danced in the pale moonlight that filtered through the grimy windows. They seemed to move with a life of their own, swirling in patterns that hinted at stories long forgotten. The silence was broken only by the sound of our own breathing, each inhale and exhale amplified in the stillness. Every step we took echoed through the empty halls, a reminder of the desolation that surrounded us. We stepped cautiously over broken glass and debris, our eyes adjusting to the gloom. The floor was a minefield of hazards, each step a calculated risk. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping noticeably as we ventured deeper into the asylum's bowels. It was as if the building itself was warning us, urging us to turn back. A cold draft brushed past me and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was a sensation that crawled up my spine, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. There was a presence here, I could feel it. It was an oppressive force, lurking just beyond the edge of perception, always there but never seen. An unseen observer, lurking in the shadows. It was as if the darkness itself had eyes, watching our every move with a malevolent intent. It sent a shiver down my spine, and I instinctively moved closer to the group. We huddled together, seeking comfort in our shared fear, knowing that whatever lay ahead we would face it together. We moved deeper into the asylum, each room we entered more unsettling than the last. Restraints lay discarded on rusty beds. Medical charts with their chilling diagnoses littered the floor. It was like stepping into a nightmare, where the line between sanity and madness blurred. The silence was broken by the occasional creak or groan of the aging building, but there were other sounds too, faint whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. They were too low to make out any words, but their tone was undeniably menacing. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. We all had. We exchanged nervous glances, each of us trying to mask our growing fear. The air grew colder still as we descended a flight of stairs. The steps were slick with moisture and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. The darkness at the bottom of the stairs felt absolute, all-consuming. We fumbled for our flashlights, their beams cutting through the darkness like knives. As my eyes adjusted, I thought I saw something move in the shadows at the end of the hallway, a flicker of movement too quick to be certain. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice barely a croak. The others followed my gaze, their faces pale in the flashlight beams. We reached a room at the end of the hallway, the door hanging open like a broken jaw, creaking ominously as if it were warning us to stay away. A chill wind rushed out, carrying with it the faint scent of decay and something else, something that made the hairs on the back of our necks stand up, something that smelled like fear, a pungent, almost metallic scent that seemed to cling to the walls. We stepped inside, our flashlights illuminating the horrors within, casting long, eerie shadows that danced on the peeling wallpaper. It was a treatment room, with a rusted operating table in the center, its surface stained with the remnants of long-forgotten procedures. Straps hung limply from the sides, and I could almost hear the screams of the patients who had been restrained there, their desperate cries echoing in the silence. And then I saw it, a movement in the corner of my eye that made my blood run cold. Standing in the corner, shrouded in shadow, was a figure, its presence almost palpable in the oppressive darkness. It was tall and gaunt, its form indistinct in the darkness, like a specter from a nightmare. But its eyes, glowing with an eerie light, were fixed on us, unblinking and full of a malevolent intelligence that sent shivers down our spines. Panic surged through me, raw and primal. I stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs. The figure moved, gliding silently towards us. Its eyes never left ours, filled with a cold, malevolent intelligence. "Run!" I screamed, my voice cracking with terror. We turned and fled, scrambling back down the hallway, our footsteps echoing in the silence. The figure moved with unnatural speed, its footsteps silent but ever closer. We could hear its ragged breathing behind us, feel its icy breath on our necks. The air crackled with fear, our own terror fueling its pursuit. We ran blindly, our lungs burning, our legs screaming for respite, but there was no escape, no sanctuary in this nightmare. The asylum seemed to stretch on forever, a labyrinth of shadows and fear. We dodged down corridors, our flashlights bouncing erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. The air was thick with the sound of our own ragged breathing and the pounding of our hearts. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The figure was closer now, its eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. Its mouth was open in a silent scream, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. We burst into a large, cavernous room, our hopes rising momentarily. But then we saw that there was no escape. The windows were boarded shut, the doors chained and padlocked. We were trapped. The figure stepped into the doorway, blocking our only exit. It stood there, bathed in the pale moonlight, its grin widening into a grotesque mockery of a smile. We were cornered prey, and it was the predator, toying with us before it moved in for the kill. The air grew heavy, the silence deafening. We were surrounded by the darkness, the oppressive weight of the asylum pressing down on us. The figure moved then, lunging towards us with impossible speed. We scattered, our screams echoing through the empty room. I could hear the others, their voices filled with terror, but I didn't dare take my eyes off the creature. It moved like a predator, stalking us through the shadows, herding us towards our inevitable demise. We were at its mercy, helpless against its supernatural power. I could feel its presence, cold and menacing, closing in on me. The air crackled with energy, the very walls seeming to vibrate with its power. The last thing I remember was the feeling of icy fingers closing around my arm, the creature's hot, fetid breath on my neck. Then darkness swallowed me whole. We never spoke of what we saw that night, but the memory lingers, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks at the edge of our reality. Willow Creek Asylum claimed our innocence, our peace of mind. We escaped with our lives, but we were forever changed, haunted by the knowledge that some things are best left undisturbed. Some doors should never be opened.